Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear friends and participants. Welcome to this session of Islam for Youth. We are going to begin a new module today, and this module actually would be the last module of our course as well. Inshallah, our course will be ending next week, and this last module consists of the worship rituals that have been prescribed by divine religions. I say divine religions because the worship rituals that we are going to discuss they are not just new to the Quran or Islam for that matter of the times of Prophet Muhammad. They have been initiated and they were in practice much earlier on, and almost all prophets of God actually observed them. So, worship rituals is the topic today, and we'll cover two of the important worship rituals. One of them is the prayer, and the other one is the fast. Of course, we are all passing through the month of Ramadan, so therefore we'll also look at some of the important aspects of fasting and the responsibilities that we have as a person who has found himself or herself in this blessed month. So I'm going to start off by explaining to you some of the initial aspects, basically, which are related to the prayer. So we're going to discuss the prayer in a slightly more comprehensive way so that you're able to understand that the importance which the prayer has in all divine religions is something that we have to really grasp, because it has the foremost importance amongst all the worship rituals. Now, the first thing that perhaps comes to our mind is that why should we pray at all? What exactly is the rationale behind praying? So the first thing that we have to understand is that prayer, or standing to pray, or observing the prayer, basically is an expression of gratitude to the favors the Almighty has given us. The whole system of this universe, the sun, the moon, the stars, the oceans, the seas, the mountains, the wind, there are so many things which are functioning for the benefit of humankind. And then in our own immediate environment, we have our parents, we have our extended family, we have so many friends who are, of course, great assets in our life. We can fall back upon them. And then if we draw even closer and look at our own human body, the eyes, the ears, our faculty of intellect, our internal systems like our digestive system, our circulatory system, all those biological things that we all, of course, would be knowing if we studied the human body. So these are the things which make us realize that, well, there is someone who is responsible for all these favors that we enjoy, and our gratitude is something that we must pay or owe him. So when we stand in prayer, basically it is to express gratitude to the Almighty for all the favors that he has done to us. And as I've been explaining, that these favors are for everyone. It's not just believers are enjoying these favors. Remember, God is God for everyone. He's not just the God for the believers or people who believe in him. His affection, his love, his sympathy encompasses every single person, every single individual, regardless of what views he may have religiously or politically or socially or in any way. So basically, when we stand up in prayer, we acknowledge the favors of God. And this acknowledgement actually is so natural that if we look in our own lives, don't we thank people who are good to us, who are affectionate to us, who have done us a favor? Isn't it an instantaneous reaction that if someone gives a gift to us, or a present or anything that we like? So what our own emotions are in return are that we would like to repay that favor, and we would wait for an opportune time in which all of us are able to do something for the person who had done something for us. And this would be like a return of favor. But you see, in the case of human beings, returning a favor is easy because you can match the favor. But in the case of God, you just cannot match his favors. The amount of favors that he has done to us, the extent of affection and attention and mercy he has shown to us in these various ways, we just cannot pay him back. So when we stand in prayer, when we say those utterances of the prayer, basically it is to acknowledge the Creator for what he has done for us. Okay, the second thing that I'd like to present here to you is that what I just said in the beginning, that the prayer is not something which began with Prophet Muhammad. In fact, he was the last prophet who had actually asked his followers to pray. Before them, all prophets of God have always had this history of asking their followers and their companions to pray to God. And of course, as I said, the prophets themselves are the ideal examples in this case. The way they pray, the way they thank God, they actually set an example in this regard. So, just to present a couple of verses here before you, which tell us that basically the Quran tells us that prophets of God, they adhere to the prayer, they observe the prayer, they offer the prayer since ancient times. So, for example, this is a verse which tells us that when Abraham was settling his son Ishmael in the land of Mecca, he said that, well, when purpose is so that they show diligence in the prayer. Rabbana liyuqimus salat. And then at another instance, in the same notion or in the same vein, he said that Rabbi ja'alni muqima salati wa min zurriyati, that Lord, make me and my progeny diligent in the prayer. So you see, when Abraham was building the holy Kaaba, the house of God, at that time, and his son Ishmael was there with him, so we can see how this has been addressed there, and how it is something which was well known in those times. And then look at the way Prophet Ishmael had said to his people, "Wakana ya'muru ahlahu bis-salat," which means that he would instruct his family to pray. And the Prophet Shuaib, of course, is another very famous prophet. He used to ask his people to pray, and in return, his people would object and say, "Does your prayer teach you that we leave the deities of our forefathers?" So this is how they would retort. This is how they would respond to Shuaib's call to offer the prayer. And Moses, of course, a very celebrated prophet of the Israelites, so he is reported to have said, the Quran mentions him, "Aqim as-salata li-zikri," be diligent in the prayer, and the purpose is to remember me. And then the Prophet Jesus himself said, "Awsani bis-salat," says, God has directed me to offer the prayer. And then the Quran says that even in the times of Prophet Muhammad, there were people of the book, the Christians and the Jews, who had accepted faith, and they were actually adhering to the prayer. They had adopted the prayer as a practice or as a worship ritual. So the words are, "Min ahlil kitabi ummatun qa'imatun yatluna ayatillahi ana al-layli wa hum yasjudun," which mean that of the people of the book, there is a group which is honoring their covenant with God. They stand at night to recite His verses and prostrate themselves before the Almighty. You see, Jews and the Christians of the times of the Prophet, which are called the people of the book, they used to offer the prayer as well. And the idolaters of Mecca, the mushrikun, what we call them, the polytheists, even they used to pray. So this verse in the Quran, فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ الَّذِينَ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ, it is about them. It is said that, so woe to these custodians of the house of God who offer the prayer while being unmindful of its essence. So the custodians of the Baytullah, of course, referring to people like Abu Jahl or people like Abu Lahab or the opponents of the Prophet, this was something that they offered as well. So, in a nutshell, what we need to understand here is that as far as the prayer is concerned, it is not something which the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ started in his own times. This was something which always existed. This was something which was always there. All previous prophets of God, they observed the prayer, and also we know from various instances that if we study the Old Testament, if we study the Bible, you'll find citations within the Bible. I have just cited the Quran before you, but if you study the Bible, you'll find something very similar. That we'll find Prophet Abraham being described as a prophet who would pray to God, Prophet Ishmael and the rest, Isaac and Jesus and Moses. All of them, if you look up, I can give you references. If you can look up the Bible, you'll see exactly the same thing is present as far as the Bible is concerned. So prayer is something which was so universal. The prayer is something which was so well known that it was instituted. What we can say is that, of course, there were certain corrections which the Prophet did in his own times, because certain innovations had crept up. But other than that, the structure of the prayer, the timings of the prayer, the utterances of the prayer. Of course, with the revelation of the Quran, the Surah Fatiha, and some of the other surahs, they were added to the format of the prayer. But when, of course, the Quran was not there, we had other divine books. So they were being read in the prayer before the prayer was offered in the times of Prophet Muhammad. So the next thing that I'd like you to bring to you as far as the prayer is concerned are these utterances of the prayer, of course. And the purpose is to tell you that as far as these utterances are concerned, they are the only ones that are, I would say, mandatory upon all of us to pronounce in Arabic, because they are the ones which have been regarded as mandatory. And other than that, wherever you have the opportunity in the prayer, you can offer the prayer in your own language within the prayer. You can offer it in English, in Urdu, in German, in Spanish, any language that you know. But on 5 occasions, this has to be in Arabic. And these 5 occasions are one of them is when you say Allahu Akbar, which means God is great. And this is something that you say when you start the prayer, when you go down in the ruku, when you go down for the prostration, then you get up in the prostration. So at all instances, when you say Allahu Akbar, that has to be said in Arabic. So this is the first thing. The second thing is that the Surah Fatiha, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, which I'm sure all of you know by heart, that has to be uttered in Arabic. You cannot just translate the surah. You should know the meanings, but you have to pronounce the surah in its language, which is the Arabic language. So these are 2 instances. Okay, the third one is when you have to add a surah of the Quran right after Surah Fatiha. So as you know, you generally pray Qul Huwallahu Ahad or Qul A'udhu Birabbil Falaq or Inna A'tainaka Al-Kawthar, various surahs of the Quran right after Surah Fatiha. So the third instance of observing the Arabic language is that when you read the Quran within the prayer, then that has to be in Arabic as well. So these are 3 instances by far. The fourth instant is when you say Sami Allahu liman hamida, which means God listened or heard him who showed gratitude. So this expression of Sami Allahu liman hamida is the fourth utterance that you need to say in Arabic. And the fifth and last is Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah when you finish the prayer. So these are the 5 occasions in which the utterances have to be in Arabic. Other than that, when you are doing ruku, or when you are doing prostration, when you are sitting in between the prostrations, when you are sitting in the qada, which is the last rakat, when you just sit, on all those occasions, you can say whatever you would like to in Arabic, in Urdu, in Arabic, in Persian, in any language that you know. You can utter the same utterances or the things that you have been prescribed, or you can substitute them by anything that comes to your mind. So as soon as you start the prayer and you say Subhanakallahumma, again, that's not a mandatory part of the prayer. So just before Surah Fatiha, you can say whatever you would like to say to Almighty in your own language. So I'm not going to display that screen here, but you will know of course, of that part when you get the written description as well. That apart from these 5 occasions, you can say the prayer in your own language, and this actually is a very beautiful mixture that you can get out of the prayer. You draw pleasure when you talk to the Almighty. So one part is mandatory that you have to say in the language of the Quran, which is the Arabic language. And I'm sure all of you by now know it by heart. So the only thing that you might consider adding is to learn more surahs of the Quran, more chapters of the Quran, with their meaning, of course, so that when you are able to study or when you're able to offer the prayer right after the Surah Fatiha, you have more options or more surahs that you can read right after Surah Fatiha. And as I said, that other than that, when you are doing ruku or your sajda or prostration, you can talk to God in your own language. You can speak to Him. You can make a prayer to Him. You can express your own desire. You can express your gratitude, anything. And that can be done in your own language. So this is something which is so important for you to know, because this will make your prayer a very interesting experience, something that becomes a heart-to-heart experience, something in which you connect to God in a much more deeper way, in a much more deeper level, because you're speaking your heart out. So in some parts, you're speaking your heart out in the form of utterances that have been made mandatory in the Arabic language, and at other instances which I just outlined. Those are 5 occasions. Just to recap, when you say Allahu Akbar, when you read Surah Fatiha, when you read a surah of the Quran, when you say Sami Allahu liman hamida, and when you say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Except for these 5 occasions, you are free to say whatever you'd like to God in any language. Okay, the next thing that I'd like to bring up in discussion regarding the prayer is that what exactly are the obligatory or the mandatory rakat of the prayer, and what exactly is the prayer in which or regarding which you have to offer the prayer come what may. So the first rakat or the mandatory rakat of the prayer are very clear, and they are called farz in Arabic, which of course is a term which is now used in English and in other languages to mean that this is something which has to be done come what may. So for the Fajr prayer, the mandatory rakats are 2. For the Zuhur, they are 4. For Asr, they are 4. For Maghrib, they are 3. And for Isha, they are 4 once again. So these are the mandatory rakat of the prayer. These are the rakat of the prayer that you have to offer come what may. Other than that, the Sunnah rakats, the Nafil rakats, the Whitser rakats, or any other rakat that you might be thinking of in your mind, all of them are optional. If you pray, well and good, because that is something that's always going to be very, very helpful for your connection with God. But if you don't, you'll not be liable for it. So the obligatory rakat or the mandatory rakat are the ones that I have just spelled out. Okay, now I'd like to talk to you something about the concession which is granted in the prayer. So you see, what happens is that when you are pushed at times regarding your own timetable or schedule, for example, you have an exam and the time of 2 prayer overlaps maybe during the exam, or maybe if you're a doctor and you're doing some surgery and the surgery is a very long process, maybe it takes 5 or 6 hours. Again, this is a contingent circumstance. Similarly, if you are traveling, there could be a host of other situations. So if this is the case, then you can combine prayers. For example, the Zuhur and the Asr prayer can be combined at either times. And the Maghrib and the Isha prayer can be combined at either time. And you can also reduce the rakat. So the 4 rakat prayer will be halved. It will become 2, but the 2 will remain as 2, and the 3 will remain as 3. So the 4 would become 2, but the 2 will remain as 2. So you will have this concession whenever there is any contingent circumstances, whenever there is a time constraint, whenever there, and trying your best, you're not able to do so. And similarly, if there is a situation in which you might be traveling, for example, you're traveling in a car or in an airplane or in some other vehicle transport, you can even pray while traveling, even if you are not facing the Kaaba. This is a concession that you have been given. So the time of the prayer arrives, and for example, you are driving a car, maybe not driving, but sitting beside the driver, or if you are in an aircraft or any other vehicle, even then you can pray in your sitting position. So these are some of the things which accommodate the prayer as much as possible in our lives. And the purpose is that such is the importance and such is the significance of this ritual that the Almighty would not like us to miss it in any circumstance. Okay, so as far as the prayer is concerned, this is what I wanted to share with you. And yes, as far as another aspect is concerned, and that is, of course, now something that we are all passing through. And this, of course, is the second worship ritual, which is the fast. Ramadan, of course, we are all passing through the month of Ramadan. And as a person, as a believer who is passing through the month of Ramadan, we should be acquainted with some of the important aspects of fasting because, of course, it comes once a year. And because of the fact that it comes once a year, at times you tend to forget some of the things that you have to observe in this period. So let me just quickly make you go through some of the important aspects of fasting, which is the second worship ritual that we are going to discuss. Okay, now as far as fasting is concerned, first of all, the background of fasting needs to be understood, and that is that you have to realize that as far as fasting is concerned, the purpose is that, you see, all of us have 2 levels of existence. We have a physical existence and we have a spiritual existence. Isn't that so? We have a soul, we have a body. So fasting is basically the nourishment of the soul. Just as eating and drinking and quenching our carnal desires, all of them they relate to the needs of the body, there are certain needs of the soul also. And you know what? These needs go hand in hand. The soul and the body, they need those aspects of nourishment almost every day. Because in order to survive, in order to live, just as our physical body needs water and oxygen and everything like that, our soul also needs some sort of nourishment. If it is not given that nourishment, it will become weak. And what is a weak soul? A weak soul is a soul who generally does not follow his or her conscience. A weak soul is a soul to whom right and wrong don't make any difference. He will do all kinds of bad things simply because he's not pushed, he's not bothered. So you see, the Almighty wants us to nourish not only our bodies but also our souls for this purpose, so that we have strong morals, so that we have a strong God connection. And during the year, the whole year, what happens is that there's this struggle which is going on between our soul and our body. The requirements of our body generally overpower the requirements of our soul. It is as if the body is gripping the soul like this. So what happens is that during that 1 month, the desires of the soul, they are forbidden for a certain period of time during the day, so that grip of the body on the soul is loosened, and the soul is able to breathe more freely, and you are able to do something for the development and advancement of the soul. So fasting basically is a worship ritual in which we are told to abstain from eating and drinking and satisfying our other desires for let's say a period of time which would range from various various periods like 12 to 16 hours, so that in that particular time the soul is given more importance. The bodily requirements are given less importance, because once you sever them, you will be left with the soul only. And for 1 month, and for let's say 15 hours average every day, you'll have a lot of time for your soul. You have a lot of time for your spiritual self. You'll have a time to reevaluate yourself. You have the time to become a better person. You'll have the time to become more connected with God. You'll have the time to be a person who is more caring of other people. And then the other thing is that as far as fasting is concerned, uh, the month of Ramadan has been selected for that. Why? The question is why. We have several other ones. Why is it that Ramadan had been selected for the month of fasting as a ritual? So the answer to that has also been given in the Quran, and that is that the Quran started to be revealed in the month of Ramadan. So it was the Ramadan is the month in which the Quran's revelation began. So when we fast in the month of Ramadan, we are actually expressing our gratitude to the Almighty for revealing the Quran to us. So basically, when we fast in Ramadan, it is like saying thank you to God for giving us this spiritual fodder, this spiritual food in the form of the Quran. So the Quran is like a spiritual need that we have, something that from which we can nourish our souls. So as a token of gratitude, we say thank you to God. And the way that we say thank you is that we fast for a particular period of time. And of course, this fasting inculcates in us patience, forgiveness, forbearance. And there's so many things that all of us experience that fasting gives us. It makes us realize how important these small achievements of life are, these small things of life are, which we tend to regret and we tend to ignore because we think that they are taken for granted. Similarly, fasting is an exercise, I would say, in which all of us think that we are being closely watched by God. Because you see, even a person who is a very sort of a careless person, if he starts fasting, even a person who is of his nature, he or she would not willfully break the fast because he or she knows that God is watching him or her. So you see, there is this sense of a connection with God, which is so strong that you could have broken your fast in privacy. You could have just drunk water in the bathroom or in the kitchen or anywhere. Isn't that so? And no one would have seen you. But what stops you from that? It is that feeling that someone is watching you from above. So you see, fasting makes you a person in which you connect to God directly, because you think that if I do something wrong, people might not be seeing me, but God is actually watching over me. So this is an exercise which should benefit us for the rest of our lives as well, for the rest of those 11 months. because it's not just in the month of Ramadan that we should be careful enough not to do anything because God is watching us. It should be our strategy all the year round, because this is how things are. It's not that God is just watching us in Ramadan. No, He's watching us in every month. And if He's watching us in every month, then we have to be careful that things which are done in privacy, sins which are committed in privacy, we might be hiding them from others, but we can never hide them from God. So this is the important thing. And then the third thing that I'd like to express here regarding fasting is, of course, something which is very similar to what I just mentioned regarding the prayer. And that is, fasting is once again not something which was introduced by the Quran or by Prophet Muhammad. All prophets of God had this worship ritual in their religions. In fact, the Almighty prescribed fasting for previous religions. So we know the Jews used to fast, the Christians used to fast, the people of Arabia, they had fasting in their own religion. And the Quran itself tells us that the fast has been made obligatory, mandatory upon Muslims, kama kutiba ala allazina min qablikum, which means just as it had been made mandatory upon previous peoples. So again, remember that as far as fasting is concerned, it's not something which has been initiated by Prophet Muhammad in any way. No, he is the last of those prophets who has given currency, who has given importance, and actually revived his spirit once again. And so fasting is something that all of us, if we are doing, we are just following previous prophets of God as well. Okay, this was something very basic about fasting. I've talked about the background. So I've talked about the fact that the objective of fasting we have just talked about, and that is to create the taqwa, which of course means that you are God conscious, you are a person who is not careless, you are a person who is always looking after the fact that you're not crossing limits. Now we are going to actually discuss these 4 questions which are very common for fasting. So the first of them is that, is moon sighting essential to begin Ramadan? No, the answer is not at all. Moon sighting was the only way to determine the beginning of a month centuries ago, when people used to observe the moon, and from that observation they would know whether the new month is started or not. So today, if we have astronomical calculations or tables which are able to determine the coming of the new month, we don't need to look at the moon. I mean, looking at the moon or sighting the moon is not a religious requirement at all. It was just a physical possibility in the times of Prophet Muhammad and in ancient times, in which people used to determine the lunar calendar. The lunar calendar was always determined by sighting the moon. However, today, if the moon can be observed through, as I said, through calculation or through any other means, so moon sighting is not an issue at all. Tables can be made, astronomical calculations can be done, and as soon as we are sure of that, we just don't need to sit and sight the moon every month the way it is done in many Muslim countries. The second thing regarding fasting that you might need to know is that at times people are passing through extreme conditions. For example, they could be extremely hot situations, or they could be extremely long fasting hours. Like, for example, there are certain areas in the world which have a 20-hour fast, or maybe a 22-hour fast at times. Similarly, there could be situations in which there is a lot of not only long summers, but very long, drawn, hot summers. Or a person could be working outside in heat. For example, he's a laborer, he's a craftsman, and he has to work in the sun. So you can imagine all sorts of extreme situations in fasting. So the Quran has given us once again a basic guidance that if for any reason that you think is valid, and the validity of a reason is something that you have to decide yourself. So whenever there is a valid reason that you decide for yourself, the Quran says that you can defer your fast. You can keep it in some other time of the year. If it is not possible to keep it during Ramadan, maybe you can keep some of the fasts and the other you can defer later on in Ramadan, later on in any part of the year. But you have to do as far as these fasts are concerned. If you miss, let's say, 10 or 15 fasts in every month, in the month of Ramadan, then you must make up those 10 or 15 fasts in other times of the year. The third question, which excuse me, and is very important, is that is the sahur is the sahur or the sehri, which we eat with which we begin the fast. Is it something of an obligation, or can we just skip the sehri? So again, the answer here is that as far as eating the sehri is concerned, it's not an obligation, it's not mandatory. You can skip the sehri, you can just eat the night food, and that would suffice. But it has been recommended that you should get up at that time, you should eat sehri, you should pray to God at that time. The time of tahajjud is always there for you at that time for you to offer. So although it's not mandatory to have sehri, but it is highly recommended because this is something which brings blessings and the barakah of the Almighty. And the last question that I'd like to answer regarding fasting is that people often ask that is uh, the Taraweeh prayer that believers they offer after the Isha prayer, is it something which is mandatory? Again, the answer here is that the Taraweeh prayer is in fact the Tahajjud prayer whose real time is the time of Sehri. And people who are not unable to get up early enough at Sehri time to offer the Tahajjud prayer, they are given this relief that they can offer it with the Isha prayer, but with the specification that it is not at all mandatory. It is highly recommended. It is something that you should do, but it does not affect your fast. If you are not doing Taraweeh, then it doesn't mean that it's going to negatively affect your fast. It's not part of the fast. It's something which is very recommended. If you can do it, well and good. And of course, your connection with the Quran would be strengthened if you hear the Quran, and preferably if you're hearing the Quran with translation. And for that, actually, the most advisable thing for you is that if you could read your Taraweeh yourself by actually picking up a Quran and reading through it yourself with the translation. So instead of listening to a Taraweeh, that is also something that you can do. But perhaps a more effective way for you to offer Taraweeh and make it more meaningful would be that when you say however much you can pray, I mean, could be four. I remember that the Taraweeh or the Tahajjud has to be in odd rakats, so maybe in threes and fives or sevens, nines or 11. So whatever the number of rakat you have chosen for yourself, you can pick up the Quran, and while the time of the Quran reading comes in the prayer, you can look at the Quran, read with the translation in your heart, and do the rest of the rituals as well. So this will make your Taraweeh or your Tahajjud prayer even more attentive for your own self, and it will be much more meaningful. Okay, so with these questions, I now come to you. If you have any questions regarding the issues that I've just raised, remember I've talked about the prayer and I've talked about the fast. These are the two important worship rituals. And inshallah, in the last session, which would be next week, I'll discuss about Hajj and Zakat and animal sacrifice, which are the three remaining worship rituals. And inshallah, we'll close our course next week. And hopefully after Ramadan, inshallah, something new will be designed for you, all those of you who are interested. But today, as I said, just to recap, I have described the prayer, the importance of the prayer, why we should pray. Remember, it is the essence of prayer is gratitude to the Almighty. The prayer is not something new. It is something which has been always offered by all prophets of God. You know, I have not described the way a prayer is offered because this is something that all of you know. What I've just described is that what are the essential parts of the prayer that have to be said in Arabic. Other than that, all other occasions within the prayer can be said in your own language. I have described how concession is given in the prayer when you are traveling, when you are sick, when various other things come. You can combine prayers, you can shorten prayers. And I have also described that the mandatory part of the prayer, or the mandatory rakat of the prayer, are just the Fajr rakat. All the rest are optional. And then we started fasting, the ritual of fasting, all of us that we are going through these days. Remember, the history of the fasting is something, again, which is very similar to the prayer. It started off with all previous prophets of God. It's not that Prophet Muhammad initiated it. The purpose of fast is to attain the level of God consciousness that God requires us to have, which means that we are able to observe the limits. We are not able to cross over into our limits. We don't cross the bounds of God. This is what is called taqwa in the Arabic language. And then we have also discussed that the need of the fast has arisen because it is the need of our soul to somehow quench its thirst. And in all those years, all those months in which the body and the soul, they are together, often the bodily requirements, they overpower the requirements of our soul. So there is this 1 month in which the bodily requirements have been prohibited to observe or to quench, so that the soul is given more time to nourish itself. And the real test of your roza or your fast actually begins after Ramadan, which would mean that how much you have gained in this workshop of 30 days and how much you have disciplined yourself. And finally, I referred to some of the important questions which often arise that Sehri is not important, is not an essential part, but it is a recommended part. Moon sighting is not something which is a requirement; it's something which can be done away with as soon as astronomical charts are developed, and I believe they already have. So we have a website called moonsighting.com, which has actually given the times in which a month will begin in a lunar calendar. Similarly, we talked about the Taraweeh prayer, that it is basically a Tahajjud prayer, which is being offered with the Isha prayer. And again, this is something which is optional in nature. If you don't offer the Taraweeh prayer, it doesn't mean that your fast has something left out in it or it's incomplete in any way. So thank you very much. I've tried to be brief regarding to these most important worship rituals. And if you have any questions that regarding what we have discussed today, I'll be very glad to answer them. Otherwise, I'd like to ask you some questions.
We have a question from Douglas Marr.
Okay, go ahead.
So you mentioned the fifth part of the necessary aspect of prayer is Assalamu alaikum. What was the rest of it? I'm sorry. It's just I can't.
So,
I can't hear Arabic too.
I will send you this list with the handout which is being uploaded at the website wherever it is being uploaded. I mean, because it's difficult to remember, I just enumerated it orally. Otherwise, you'll get a list of that in the handout.
Okay, got it. Will the handout also include the mention of Siri and that last prayer you were talking about? Is it called Hajjuth? I couldn't quite. I don't know how to spell them. So will the handout have the spelling?
Which I couldn't get you.
There was like one prayer that you were talking about as one other thing that's not necessary for fasting.
The Tahajjud prayer or the Taraweeh prayer.
Hajjuth. Okay.
Yeah.
And the handout will talk about that stuff too?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to briefly talk about that. Otherwise, what you can always do is you can listen to today's recording once again, and you'll have a lot of other material which is available at my website or at some of my colleagues' website, which discusses all these aspects of the fast.
The next question is from Mehreen Asad. Please go ahead.
I have a question, but it's not really related to the lesson. So if else has one,
go ahead. Yes, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, so Burger King just released like this burger that's like a full veggie patty. Okay, and our family only eats like halal, like if a restaurant says halal, so we don't eat the meat at Burger King. But under the description of that burger, it says that the patty is cooked on the same grill as their beef patties. So would that still be okay to eat?
The patty is cooked at the same grill as
the beef patties, but not with pork.
Beef patties, okay, which are of course the non-halal ones. Well, it's difficult to say from here. What I can just say is that if your restaurant gives you this undertaking that whatever they are serving you is halal, I think you should rely on them. But if they have actually given you this detail that they are cooked on the same grill, then this is kind of a gray area, because you see, if they are cooked on the same grill, then there are always bits and pieces. Like, for example, the oil would be sticking there, or maybe bits of that beef would be there. So I would advise a careful person to perhaps abstain, unless, of course, there is some assurance in which people say, or the person says that the grill has been cleaned enough or sufficiently so that the beef has been done away with totally. Because the other thing is that since the patty is being cooked, what happens is that if there is beef already present, at times it gets there is a possibility that it gets mixed up with that patty. So that's just something which I'm just loudly thinking and sharing with you. But what I'd like you to do is just find out a little more and trust your own gut feeling about it.
Okay, thank you.
Before we go over to Doug's question, there was a question from Alina who asked, she asked a couple of questions. One was, how important is Whitser and Isha? Like during Isha?
Right. So as far as witr are concerned, it's an optional prayer. It's not a mandatory part. If you if you are able to do that, it's good. I mean, it's something that you'll always earn a reward, but it's not something that you have to do. It's always something in which you have a choice either to offer it or not offer it. So witr or sunnah or nafil, all these are forms of prayer which are optional in their nature. They are not required. They're not farz. They're not obligatory.
There was another question about, is sunnah necessary before and after prayers?
It's not necessary at all. As I said, the sunnah is another part of another form of the prayer which is offered before the first rakat. Again, that's an optional form. So whether you're offering the sunnah or the nafil or the witr, all these three are optional, though recommended, but they are not mandatory. The mandatory rakat are the ones that I just spelled out: two of Fajr, four of Zohar, four of Asr, three of Maghrib, and four of Isha. That's it. These are the essential rakats that have to be offered. Other than that, besides that, it's entirely your own discretion.
Thank you so much. Doug, you're next.
I'm sorry if this is a rather obvious question, but could you just sort of explain the steps of the necessary prayers, like the necessary parts? Say one that has four rakats, because I've heard different things from different people, I feel like, or from different sources online about what is technically a necessary part and what isn't.
Well, if you're talking about the rituals of the prayer, I mean the components of the prayer, or are you talking about the utterances?
Oh well, I guess the utterances count as a part of it, right? I suppose it's both that I'm asking about.
You're talking about the rituals. I mean the practices.
Well, yes, I mean the practices of what you have to say and also what you have to do. What
So,
parts are necessary and what parts have been added
so
on.
well, right. So you see, as far as the rituals are concerned, I mean, you stand up, you start the prayer, then you kneel, then you stand up again, then you go into a state of prostration. You sit between prostrations. This completes one rakat, and you can have a two rakat prayer, or a three rakat prayer, or a four rakat prayer. And there is no difference in this if you can just maybe view a video of these rituals, how they are offered, these practices. You'll get to know the postures because there's absolutely no difference anywhere. As far as the utterances are concerned, as I said, there are five occasions in which you have to offer those utterances in the original language, which is the Arabic language. And other than that, on all those other occasions, like for example, when you're kneeling, when you're prostrating, when you're sitting between two prostrations, when you have just begun the prayer, when you sit down in the last rakat, which means that you have a long posture, a long posture when you're just before saying Assalamu alaikum. All these are occasions within the prayer in which you can talk to God in your own language regarding anything that you have in mind.
Could I just also ask, there's a part of the prayer, I think it's in the fourth rakat of Isha, because Isha is the only prayer I've ever tried before, where I think it's you're doing your final kneeling and it's before you say Assalamu alaikum. Um, it's sort of like this long thing you have to recite. Do you know what it's called? Because I,
Yes,
I don't
so
know
that
the
is
name.
called, yeah, that's called dua qunut, but that is generally said in the witr prayer, which is a part of the Isha prayer. But because of the fact that most people think that that part is an essential part, I've just corrected that as far as the witr are concerned, in which you recite what you just referred to, that is entirely an optional part of the prayer. If you do it, it's well and good. If you don't, it's fine as well. So the thing that you're referring to is the dua of kunut, which means that there is a certain prayer or a certain supplication actually which the Prophet uttered at that time, but at the same time he made it clear that this is not something which is essential, an essential part of the prayer. It is something which is over and above.
Oh, okay.
Doug,
So got it. Thank you.
sorry, Doug. I just to clarify, I think it was sung, but Allahumma salli.
So you are referring to the durud because he said when you get up. I talk. I mean, if you're
Saying
more
right
specific,
before the salam, which
okay, whatever you say before the salam in your whole sitting posture is your own discretion. You can say the durood, which is the dua for the Prophet, is a supplication for the Prophet. So durood is a Persian word to mean prayer for the Prophet. So you can, if you want, you can utter it If you want, you can just say something else. Whatever is uttered in the last part of the prayer, even in the middle part when you're sitting down, again has been left to our discretion. We can say it in Arabic, we can say it in any other language, and again, it has not been fixed that what we have to say. It's just it has been left to our discretion that we can say whatever we like in our own language or in Arabic.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Saleem, I had a couple of questions of my own, if that's okay.
Fine, that's fine. Please go ahead.
So I was wondering, if prayer is a way to thank God and show Him our gratitude, why do we need to thank Him in a specific way and like say specific things and pray together?
Right.
Like, why can't we just do it as a personal thing?
So that's a good question. You see, what happens is that this urge to thank God is found in every person. So the Almighty had to set up a prescribed form, because if you look at history, you'll find that so strong is this urge that if a prescribed form is not certain, people either go to extremes or they start doing all sorts of prayers that might even, they could extend to 12 or 15 hours a day, or there could be other people who would just say, okay, I'll just say something by my tongue and that is all. So because of the fact that human beings are prone to extremes, either this extreme or that extreme, and they don't know how to express their gratitude in a way that is more uh, beneficial to them. So it is here that the Almighty has done two things. First, He has prescribed a quantity, a certain amount, so that people don't go beyond it. If they want to go beyond it, then they should know that it's their own choice. It's not something that He has prescribed. And two, He has actually a certain or prescribed or appointed form. Like, for example, this is how you pray before God, because this is again something that we could not have discovered for our own selves. That what exactly is something which is going to satiate our thirst to connect to God. Is it that we should leave food? Is it that we should just leave this world and become hermits and recluses? Or is it that we can live in this world and still connect with God? And what are the ways of connecting with God? So you see, as far as the ways of connecting to God are concerned, they are something which only God could have told us, and this is how He did so. And then the second thing is that as far as these ways themselves are concerned, they have to be quantified so that people don't go into either extremes.
Okay, thank you. One more question. Why can't women fast during their periods even if they feel healthy?
Because you see, this is a relief which has been given by the Prophet, and he said that as far as fasting is concerned, it's an act of purity. Of course, it's something that you do when you are in a state of ritual purity. And when women are passing through their menstrual cycles, it is because of the fact that it has been regarded as unclean or impure blood. So therefore, this is something in which they are told that they should neither pray nor fast nor do tawaf. So this is something which is like a concession which has been given to them. Of course, they don't need to make up for the prayers, but they do need to make up for their fasts.
Like, why are women impure during periods?
Well, actually, this is something which we have been told by the Almighty, that as far as these cycles are concerned, the blood which comes out, the words of the Quran are huwa azan. They are a form of impurity, and men and women have been asked for precisely this reason to abstain any intimate relations during this period, because this is the period in which women have been asked to. They have to go through this cycle for a certain reason. This is the birth cycle, of course, is meant for the child in its proper when the proper time comes. But other than that, it is something that we have been told that it's an impure state to be in. And the fact that we could have differed, or there could have been people who had said, well, why should we call ourselves to be impure, and this is something very pure. So this could have been a debate between human beings. And I think, to my mind, God has given His decision here that, well, this is something that has to be regarded as impure. And for this reason, you have to abstain from worship rituals.
Okay. We have a Facebook question. Can I ask?
Yeah, sure.
So it asks, can tahajjud be offered after 12 a.m. As students study till late night, is it necessary to wake up before Fajr?
Well, obviously, the recommended part is that tahajjud actually means something which is offered once you break your sleep. So the word Arabic word tahajjud actually comes from breaking your sleep. So the ideal way would be that you break your sleep and you get up at night. But as you said, there are people who are, I mean, awake, especially students today after midnight. So I guess they can say the prayer after midnight whenever they can, if they're not sleeping. But although it's more beneficial and it's, I mean, the proper form would be that you sleep and get up. But if for some reason you are still awake, then you can do so. Okay, so I think we have had a good discussion. So remember, we have discussed the prayer and the fast today, and this note that you should always keep in mind that these are the worship rituals which have always been prescribed by almost all religions of God, all divine religions. It's not something which was initiated in the times of Prophet Muhammad, and the basic reason for all these worship rituals is taskiyah. Taskiyah is an Arabic word which means self purification, to purify yourselves, to become people who are pure in their dealings, in their ways, in their morals.
Oh, Doug just raised his hand again.
Okay, go ahead, Douglas.
Thank you. Um, so I'm familiar that praying is something that's gone back as far as Judaism, but I've never heard of Jews or Christians having to fast. But you're claiming that it's been a part of their religions the whole time. What
Hmm.
evidence are you using to conclaim that, or conclude that? Is that
I
based on the
think
Quran? Or?
the evidence has been given in some of the books. I can refer you to them. The Lent, which the Christians observe even today, that's the same thing as fasting, slightly different form. The Jews also, they also fast. They have a slightly different form. If you look up their books, you'll find that it is prescribed to them. And you'll find that Moses and Jesus and all these prophets of God and even Abraham, he observed fast, and it is mentioned in the Bible. So my source is the Bible itself. Okay, so thank you very much. Inshallah, we'll see each other next week. That would be, as I said, the last session of our series for this series, and hopefully we'll start a new one sometime later. And until next Saturday, it is Khuda Hafiz and bye bye from your teacher.